As part of CACI's commitment to the public sector, we partner with the local Area Research and Intelligence Association, or LARIA for short. Our principal role has been to share best practice and promote effective use of data, which has also been supported by many of our public sector clients. CACI have presented at many LARIA conferences and webinars where we focused on key sector challenges and shared valuable insights that can be used to evidence decision making. We've recorded a series of podcasts that will provide viewers with an introduction to LARIA, insights drawn from a recent member survey, as well as discuss challenges linked to the cost of living. In this session, we're talking to LARIA's chair, Kate Waterhouse, who is the Executive Director of Transformation and Strategy at Bury Council. Hi, Kate. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
No problem. I thought I would start with an easy one, which is to just ask you a bit, to tell the audience a bit about yourself, where you come from and what you do.
Okay, so yeah, I'm Kate Waterhouse. I'm the current chair for LARIA. In terms of my employment history, I started life as a market researcher, straight out of uni, working for an inward investment organisation in the east of England. And then research has always stayed a core part of my employment. I guess I'm one of those data geeks who loves evidence and intelligence. So I've kind of meandered around public and private sector jobs, but never too far away from data. And now I'm Exec Director for Strategy and Transformation at Bury, where I'm responsible for corporate core functions, which include policy, performance, partnerships, all of which are very data-driven, as you'd expect.
Of course, which is amazing. So I think what would be really good for people who are not familiar with LARIA is to ask you a bit about a day in the life of your role within LARIA, and actually sort of look at what it is that you actually do and what your day looks like.
Okay. I guess the first point to make is that there isn't a typical day, and being LARIA chair, as I've just said, isn't my full-time job. So LARIA and all of the council members, we're all volunteers. So we do this role in conjunction with our full-time jobs or other work that's being undertaken. So I guess that's plea number one for more people to get involved with LARIA. We absolutely rely on our members and we rely on people volunteering to do roles like this. So it's useful to get as many people as possible to help share that work. So what is the work? I guess it's promoting LARIA as an organisation. We're here to support our members and the roles that they undertake in their local authorities. And to do that, we want to promote membership to more people so that we can build that research and intelligence network and that peer-to-peer support, which is what LARIA is all about. We have a couple of set pieces during the year where we have a conference and we have an awards series as well, which thank you for your support with over the years. And those tend to be the big events where we get the network together, hopefully in person for the first time this year in a while. And everybody really values that opportunity to interact and get to know each other.
So you've been chair at LARIA since 2022. I'm keen to find out a bit more about whether or not it's what you expected, and in particular looking at kind of what your achievements have been during your time and also looking forward to what you've got coming up.
I think obviously becoming chair in 2022, we were still in the midst of the COVID pandemic response. And at that point, I think my expectations were we needed to support our members because we knew it was a really difficult time for people who were under a lot of pressure to provide data and information to their organisations, probably in a way like never before. And whilst that's been a great opportunity to demonstrate the value of data and insight in supporting vulnerable communities, it also put a lot of pressure on teams that in many cases have become a lot smaller due to austerity in local government and the public sector more generally. So I think I expected it to be a bit high pressure, but I think I underestimated how proud I would be of the work that everybody did. And when it came to decisions like, shall we go ahead with a conference, shall we move online, and we took that decision to go online, I was just so pleased to see the amount of engagement that we got with that, the number of people who came forward to present papers and to come and be part of webinars, and then the volume and quality of work that was done by our members during that period was outstanding. So I was expecting that, but it was great to see. I think the things that have been challenging for us are because of those pressures around funding a number of organisations no longer choose to be corporate members, and there's pressure on our individual membership fees as well. So if we want LARIA to continue to be there to support that network, we need to work hard to keep our membership and to make sure that we continue as a viable organisation. So that puts quite a lot of pressure on LARIA Council to think of ways that we can look for new funding streams and make sure we are still relevant to our membership so that they continue to subscribe.
And would you say that that's a key priority for you in terms of the membership moving forward?
Absolutely, and that's why we're keen to move back to a face-to-face conference this year, because we know that was one of the things that was really important to our members. And although the online conferences were helpful in keeping the network together, it's not the same as meeting in person. And also to support that, LARIA used to have a really strong regional network. And again, during COVID, where people got out of the habit of perhaps meeting up in person, some of those networks have fallen away. So we want to try and reinvigorate those partnership groups again, a mix of local authority and other local organisations, as a way of boosting membership and then encouraging more people to come along to the annual conference as well.
And it's interesting because actually in the survey, which we will talk about in a separate session, there is feedback from members about actually meeting in person and actually networking events and conferences. So it's very prudent at the moment.
It's really important. I think particularly because what we have found is data and research functions have become smaller within local authorities. So you don't have those same networks just sitting at the desk next to you to turn to and ask for advice. So that's what LARIA could offer. And that's why it's great to get people together to say, I'm just working on this, are you? And what's the best way to try and get this bit of data?
Not reinventing the wheel.
Absolutely. And that is what the LARIA offer should be all about.
Thank you for that, Kate. That's very interesting to hear. What I'm keen to find out is a bit more about what you think is facing the sector in terms of challenges and actually how LARIA could help assist people with those challenges.
Yeah, I think like we were just talking about, the challenges are often funding related. So while we wait for future funding settlements for local government, there's always pressure on corporate services in particular within councils. So I think that horrible saying of doing more with less still continues to be the challenge for a lot of our members. And that can mean perhaps not being able to pay to subscribe to data sets or not being able to commission primary research in the way they used to. So potentially having to do more with publicly available data. So I think there's those kind of pressures, but at the same time, there's increased demand on our members as well. So we know, for example, within adult social care, we've got a new quality inspection regime coming forward, which will have a lot more emphasis on data. So particularly us as an authority, you know, we're already looking at how we're going to support that, how we're going to get practitioners to be able to have access to the data they need, and how we're going to have the performance management frameworks in place to support that. That's one of many. We've got a new inspection regime coming through in housing as well. And we know that the government's also looking at general performance measures for local government. So if there's a requirement to start reporting against those as well, then we're starting to mount up demand on what are, you know, quite small teams in some cases. So again, I think that's where LARIA can help its members by hopefully being a voice for the sector. But as you've said, sharing best practice, being that person that you can call in perhaps a neighbouring authority or somewhere that you know has got similar issues to you, and just try and share that expertise and share some of the burden of doing the work. I
think that's quite key in actual fact, because we see that a lot ourselves, where many of our prospective clients want to know what someone else is doing and how they're using the data. So case studies and like sharing best practice is really key. So it's interesting to hear that that's your view as well.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. So Kate, we've just been talking about kind of the value in sharing best practice. So what I'm quite keen to find out is how important data is from a strategic and intelligence point of view for members and also the wider public sector.
I mean, obviously, I would say data is really important, but I really do think data is very important. Within the public sector, as we've been discussing, there's lots of hard decisions that need to be taken every single day, and using evidence and data to help inform those decisions is what makes those decisions defendable and transparent. And we're all, you know, have to justify those decisions to our taxpayers, our stakeholders, etc. So therefore, I think, you know, data and intelligence continues to be really important to our senior management teams, to those of us who work to counsellors. There's a never-ending request for information to help justify decisions. I think it's really important that that is seen as in a professionalised way. There's obviously data all around. You know, you only have to sort of turn on the TV and you'll be swamped with statistics and information. Therefore, I think the role of our membership is to be that professional advice, to have a look at data and say, is it meaningful? Is it robust? Is it credible? Is it the kind of information that you should be using to make decisions about services for people? And to allow then people to have confidence in the data they're using to make those decisions. I also think there's a real role for our members then once decisions are made in terms of monitoring impact. So we've made a decision, how has that played out with the community? How has that played out with the residents who've been affected? And making sure that we truly understand the impact on things like equality and on those communities who've been affected by decisions, and tracking that impact on performance is really important.
And that's quite interesting because a lot of the organisations we're talking to, it's all about where do we prioritise and put our services and using data as an evidence base, but then actually monitoring what the impact of that is and actually have they achieved meaningful change, which is ultimately where you need to get to. Yeah. What I'd be interested to hear from you on is, for those organisations who don't believe in using data as an evidence base, what would you say to them?
How are you making your decisions? I think perhaps sometimes people always don't know what do we mean by data. So when you say data, a lot of people can think we mean surveys or we mean you know, big spreadsheets full of lots of evidence. And it can be that, but it can also be what data are you gathering from the services you provide? What customer feedback are you getting? What contact information do you get from people that members are speaking to, that your contact centre is speaking to? And all of those bits can come together to help inform decision making. It doesn't need to be difficult. I think some people think it will delay the process. Yeah. You know, if we're talking about being data-led, that adds 6 months to a time frame. And as I'm sure we'll come on to in this day and age, that's just not true.
And I think also people who don't understand what the data actually is and what's available to them. So it's great to hear that that's your view as well. Another question I was quite curious to find out is a bit more about those organisations who are on the start of their journey. What advice would you give to them about using data and intelligence?
That's a good question. I guess part of me thinks what a great time to be at the start of your journey. You know, gone are the days that you would have to say, well, what data have we got? Someone go down in the basement and trawl through old archives of written forms to find information. There is data everywhere, isn't there? But I guess that's probably quite intimidating as well, that a lot of organisations use the phrase to say we're data rich, we're intelligence poor, and we don't know where to start. I think, you know, good research practice would always say, well, what's the question you want to answer? Start by thinking through what do you need that data to tell you, and then you can start thinking about whether you've got the right data and what else you might need. But we don't need to be that structured anymore with new technologies that are in place. There's a lot that we can do now just to say, well, what data have we got and what's it telling us? What trends, what information are we already sitting on? And that's the power of new technologies that organisations can use. So I would say, you know, find yourself a researcher, preferably a LARIA member, and they'll help you to get started and make sure that you're using data in the best way.
That's great. And actually technology is something that we'll cover in the next session with the survey. You mentioned sort of being data rich and insight poor. How would you tackle that? How could you advise somebody to tackle that kind of challenge?
Again, I think it's all about asking the right questions. So if people say we feel like we don't know what we don't know, that often can be unpicked if you start to break it down to say, well, is it that you want to understand your resident groups? Is it that you want to understand what services people are using? What is it that you think you don't know? And then we can start to peel the onion layer by layer to try and get to the data that you need.
What I'd be really interested now to find out is, why should organisations actually work with or join the LARIA membership? I know you've talked about sort of getting more people on board, so why should people be joining the LARIA family?
Okay, I think what LARIA offers is that professionalised standard in terms of what it means to be a researcher within local government or within some of the public sector organisations who are part of our membership. I think it's nice to feel part of a network where people recognise what good quality research looks like, and that you can work with your peers to be able to achieve that. And that's why I think why our awards are so important, because that is public recognition of good practice within the data and intelligence sector. So I think that's an important point. Obviously, the more members we get and the more feedback we get from members, the more effective we can be the voice of the sector as well. So where new things do come down that have got data requirements linked to them, we're able to respond. So for example, during COVID, when there was a lot of requests for data returns and information to come back, we were able to be a conduit between the sector and, say, central government on how practical those requests were and how our members were finding working with data during that particular response period. So that would be two examples of why I think LARIA membership's important.
Great, okay. And also, I think what's next for LARIA? I know we've talked about the conference, but what other things is LARIA working on that people should know about?
Well, absolutely, the focus at the moment is the conference. This will be our first time to get together face-to-face post-pandemic. So we really want to make sure that's a success and that people, again, feel the benefit of being in the same room with each other. We've got some really good speakers lined up, including yourselves, but I think it's going to be a really interesting programme, and hopefully we'll see the benefits of people coming back together. As I said, after that, what we want to do is hopefully use that as a launch pad to reinvigorate the regional networks and get people meeting more frequently. And one of the things we want to explore is whether regional networks are perhaps still relevant. We think they are. We still think there's something in being in a geography, but we're also getting feedback from members that being sector specific is important as well, and getting people together around communities of practice is important. And as part of that, something we're just starting to explore is links with academia, because we know there's a lot more links that we could make with universities, with further education institutions, other providers, which would help to strengthen that network and, again, share some, hopefully, resources in terms of access to data and information, but also potentially new training avenues for members and access to new networks.
Would you also consider widening the net as well, so that, because I know predominantly it's local government heavily based for obvious reasons, but would you also be looking to sort of expand out to emergency services and or NHS and things like that?
Yeah, I think that's really important, and we had done a lot of work around that under the previous health and care system, with working with different clinical commissioning groups and working with that local footprint. And we need to make sure we don't lose that in the move to the integrated commissioning systems. But absolutely, our name is local area rather than local government. So anybody who is practicing in a local area is welcome to join. And
I think we see there's been sort of an increase in partnerships, which actually, that's part of the reason why I asked that question, where stakeholders are actually working together. I mean, how important do you think that working in partnership is across the sector?
It's really important, and again, it's one of the key learnings from COVID. During that response phase, when we saw the wealth of data that partners in a local area had and how we could bring that together to support vulnerable communities, was such, not an eye-opener, because I think we always knew that data was there, but seeing that how it could be used, seeing it being used in practice, and perhaps knocking down some of those information governance, data protection issues that we'd seen in the past, has given, I think, a real impetus to more partnership working and greater sharing of information, so that we do make sure that support services are offered to those who need them most.
Great. Well, it's great to hear that that's what you want to do, and I think we've come to the end of our session, which is really quite amazing. But thank you so much for joining us and coming along and talking about your role in LARIA. Now we've come to the end of our Meet the LARIA Chair session, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Kate for joining us and talking about her achievements and the future for LARIA. If you'd like to find out more about LARIA or explore how to become a LARIA member, simply visit laria.org.uk.